The chamber on Nethara was enormous. It stretched upward like the inside of a cathedral, but instead of stained glass, the walls were lined with living screens that showed the stars outside. 12 species sat in their designated sections, each one arranged in a wide circle around a central platform where the High Arbiter stood. His name was Zelkone. He was old, even by the standards of the Vorath, a species that could live for over 1,000 years. His body was tall and pale, with 6 long limbs that moved slowly, like branches in a gentle wind. His voice, when he spoke, filled the entire chamber without the need for any device. "The matter before us is simple," Zelkone said. He pressed one of his limbs against the central console, and a holographic map appeared in the air above the platform. 3 small moons glowed red in a region marked as the Ardent Rift. The humans have violated the boundaries set by this council. They have placed colonies on 3 moons inside restricted space. This is not a misunderstanding. This is not an accident. This is a challenge. There were murmurs around the chamber. Some species clicked or hummed in agreement. Others were quiet, but none of them spoke in defense of the humans. Humanity had been part of the Galactic Governance Council for 42 years, and in all that time, they had never been treated as equals. When they were first admitted, the Council gave them the lowest diplomatic standing possible. Their trade routes were limited. Their technology was embargoed. Their fleet was restricted to a small number of patrol ships that were barely fit for border duty. The message was clear from the beginning. Humans were guests, not partners. They were tolerated, not respected. And for 42 years, humans had accepted it. They smiled at diplomatic dinners. They signed unfair trade agreements. They nodded when other species talked down to them. The galaxy saw this and came to a simple conclusion. Humans were weak. Zelkone raised one limb for silence. "I call for a vote. The resolution is as follows. The human species has violated the boundary accords. The penalty, as defined by galactic law, is military enforcement. Does this council authorize the use of force against Earth and its colonies?" The vote was unanimous. 12 species, 12 votes in favor, not a single voice against. Zelkone closed the session with a slow nod. He expected what came next would be quick. Humans had no real fleet, no real weapons, no real allies. The war, he believed, would last a few weeks at most. Earth would surrender, the colonies would be removed, and the galaxy would return to its normal order. He was wrong about all of it. 6 hours later, on the other side of the galaxy, a secure transmission reached Earth. It arrived at the United Naval Command Headquarters in Geneva, in a room buried 3 floors underground, where Admiral Greg Sawyer sat behind a plain metal desk. He was a broad man in his 60s, with gray hair cut short, and hands that looked like they had been built for work, not paperwork. He read the message once, then he read it again. Then he leaned back in his chair and let out a long, slow breath. The Council had declared war on humanity. Sawyer did not panic. He did not call a press conference. He did not contact the president. Instead, he picked up a private line, one that was connected to no official network, routed through no government system, and dialed a number he had memorized 20 years ago. The call was answered on the second ring. "It's done," Sawyer said. "They voted. Unanimous." There was silence on the other end. Not the silence of shock, not the silence of fear. It was the silence of someone who had been waiting a very long time for exactly this moment. Then a voice came through. It was a woman's voice, calm, low, and steady. The kind of voice that did not rise, even when the world was falling apart. "Finally," she whispered. Her name was Laura Beckett. She was 53 years old, and she had spent the last 19 years running an operation that did not officially exist. Deep beneath the floor of the Pacific Ocean, inside a facility that appeared on no map and no budget, she had built a war room. 200 officers worked there in shifts, running simulations, updating strategies, monitoring every ship and every fleet movement in Council space. They had trained for this day the way a surgeon trains for an operation, with calm hands and absolute focus. Laura stood up from her chair. The room around her was dim, lit by the blue glow of dozens of screens. Every officer stopped what they were doing and looked at her. They already knew. They had been watching the same transmission. "Begin," Laura said. That was all. One word. The room moved. Officers turned to their stations. Communications went out on encrypted channels. Across the solar system and beyond, things began to happen. Ships that had been sleeping inside hollowed-out asteroids started warming their engines. Weapons platforms hidden in the rings of Saturn received activation codes. Supply lines that had been disguised as commercial shipping routes switched to military priority. It had taken 42 years. 42 years of being laughed at. 42 years of trade restrictions, political insults, and quiet humiliation. And during every single one of those years, humanity had been building. Not loudly, not proudly, quietly, like water cutting through stone. On a patrol ship near the edge of human-controlled space, a young lieutenant named Kyle Dunn was halfway through a cup of cold coffee when the alert came through. He was 26, with dark hair and a face that still looked like it belonged to a college student, not an officer. He stared at the message on his screen and felt his stomach drop. War. The Council had declared war. He looked around the bridge of his small ship. The other crew members were reading the same thing. Nobody spoke. The silence was thick and heavy, like the air before a storm. Then a second message arrived, this one addressed directly to him. Transfer orders. He was being reassigned, effective immediately, to a ship called the Pale Horse. He had never heard of it. The orders gave no details, no explanation, just coordinates and a departure time. Kyle did not know it yet, but his life had just changed completely. The Pale Horse was not just a ship. It was the flagship of a fleet the galaxy did not know existed, commanded by a woman the galaxy had never heard of, citing a war the galaxy thought would be easy. The Council believed they were going to punish a young, foolish species for stepping out of line. They believed the war would be short and simple, like scolding a child. They had no idea that the child had grown up a long time ago, and she had been sharpening her teeth in the dark, waiting for them to open the door. Somewhere beneath the Pacific, Laura Beckett stood in front of her war map and studied the positions of every Council fleet. She knew their numbers. She knew their routes. She knew their weaknesses. She had studied them for 19 years the way a hunter studies the ground before setting a trap. And now the trap was set. All the Council had to do was walk into it. She allowed herself a small smile. Then she got back to work. Laura Beckett was 11 years old when she decided what her life would be about. She had been sitting on the floor of her parents' living room in a small town in Colorado, watching the television with her knees pulled up to her chest. It was the day humanity made first contact with the Galactic Governance Council. The whole world was watching. A human delegation, dressed in their best suits and carrying hopeful smiles, stood before the Council's ambassador on a stage that had been built just for the occasion. The ambassador was a tall creature with silver skin and 4 arms. He looked at the humans the way a person might look at an insect crawling across a dinner table, with mild disgust and no respect at all. He spoke slowly, as if the humans might not understand basic words. "You are new," the ambassador had said, "and you are small. The Council will allow you a seat, a small one, at the back. Try not to make noise." The audience on Nethara had laughed. Some of the humans on stage had laughed too, nervously the way people do when they are embarrassed and do not know what else to do. But Laura did not laugh. She sat on that living room floor and felt something cold settle into her chest. It was not sadness. It was not anger, not exactly. It was something deeper, something quieter. It was purpose. She did not tell anyone. She did not write it down. She simply decided, in the way that children sometimes decide things with a clarity that adults have lost, that one day the galaxy would never laugh at her species again. Now, 42 years later, she stood in a facility that she had helped design, running a war that she had helped engineer. And the galaxy was about to learn what happens when you give a patient species a reason to be dangerous. The preparations had begun long before Laura took command. 23 years after first contact, when it became clear that the Council would never treat humanity fairly, a small group within Earth's military began a secret project. They called it the Long Winter. The idea was simple but enormous. Build a hidden military force powerful enough to fight the entire Council, and do it without anyone in the galaxy noticing. It started with shipyards. On the far side of Earth's moon, in craters that never saw sunlight, construction teams worked in silence. They built docks, assembly lines, and weapons factories, all of them buried under layers of rock and shielded from every kind of scanner the Council used. Over 15 years, those shipyards produced 300 warships. Each one was moved, piece by piece, to hollowed-out asteroids in 4 different star systems and put to sleep. They floated in the dark, like seeds, waiting for spring. Captain Derek Holt had been in charge of hiding them. He was a lean man with sharp features and a dry sense of humor that he used the way other people used coffee, to get through long days. He had spent 6 years of his life moving ships into rocks, and he had done it so well that not a single Council sensor had ever picked up a trace. Now he stood on the bridge of the Pale Horse, Laura's flagship, and watched as the Ghost Fleet came alive. On his screen, one by one, 300 green dots appeared across the star map. Each one was a warship powering up for the first time in years, shaking off dust and silence. All 300 confirmed active, Holt said. No detection alerts from Council sensors. Laura nodded. She was standing beside him, her arms crossed, her eyes moving across the map with the calm focus of a chess player who can see 12 moves ahead. Good. Move them to the rift corridors. No active scans until I give the word. On Titan, the largest moon of Saturn, another piece of the plan was waking up. Dr. Nora Paget had not slept in 31 hours, but her hands were steady and her mind was clear. She was a small woman with short gray hair and glasses that she kept pushing up her nose out of habit, even though they fit perfectly. She had spent 20 years of her life in this laboratory, and she had built something that would change the way wars were fought forever. She called it the Blackwell Array. The idea behind it was elegant and terrifying. Every object in the universe is affected by gravity. Stars, planets, ships, people. Everything is pulled by invisible forces. What Nora had done was find a way to create those forces on purpose, at a distance, with extreme precision. The Blackwell Array could generate a gravitational field strong enough to crush a warship from the inside. It could fold metal like paper. It could turn a battle cruiser into a ball of scrap in seconds, without firing a single bullet or missile. The Council had nothing like it. They did not even know it was possible. Nora ran her final checks and sent a message to Laura. Array is online. Full operational capacity, ready on your order. Back on Earth, Admiral Greg Sawyer stood behind a podium in front of 200 reporters. The lights were bright, and the room was loud with questions. He raised one hand, and the room went quiet. 6 hours ago, Sawyer said, the Galactic Governance Council voted unanimously to declare war on Earth and its colonies. I want to be clear with every citizen watching this broadcast. We did not seek this war. We have spent 42 years trying to live in peace within the rules the Council set for us. But the Council has decided that peace is no longer an option. He paused. His face was calm. His voice was even. He did not mention the long winter. He did not mention the Ghost Fleet, or the Blackwell Array, or the war room beneath the Pacific. The public did not need to know those things. Not yet. "We will defend ourselves," Sawyer continued. "We will protect our people, and we will not stop until this conflict is resolved on terms that are fair and lasting." The reporters erupted with questions. Sawyer answered some and ignored others. What he did not say, what he could not say, was that the 3 colonies in the Ardent Rift had been placed there on purpose. Humanity had known exactly which line to cross, and exactly how the Council would respond. The violation was not a mistake. It was bait. 1,200 light-years from Earth, Kyle Dunn arrived at the coordinates from his transfer orders and saw the Pale Horse for the first time. He had expected a warship. What he saw was something else entirely. It was massive, easily 5 times the size of any human ship he had ever served on, and its design was unlike anything in the fleet. It was sleek, dark gray, and built with curves instead of hard angles. It looked less like a machine and more like something alive. He docked his shuttle and stepped aboard. The corridors were wide, clean, and quiet. Officers moved with purpose. No one was running. No one was shouting. Everything felt precise and controlled, like the inside of a clock. Holt met him at the bridge entrance. "Lieutenant Dunn?" "Yes, sir." Holt looked him up and down. "You look young." "I get that a lot, sir." Holt almost smiled. "Good. Young means you haven't learned any bad habits yet. Follow me." He led Kyle onto the bridge, and there she was, Laura Beckett, standing in front of a holographic map of Council space that filled half the room. She looked like someone's mother, someone who might grow tomatoes in a garden or read books on a Sunday afternoon. But her eyes told a different story. They were sharp and steady, and when they landed on Kyle, he felt like he was being read like a page in a book. "Welcome aboard, Lieutenant," she said. Then she turned back to the map. Kyle looked at the map with her. It showed every Council fleet, every defense station, every supply route, and deep at the center of it all, glowing like a small sun, was Nethara, the Council's capital. Laura reached out and tapped it with one finger. "We don't win by sitting here and waiting for them to come to us," she said to Holt, who had come to stand beside her. "We win by going there. We win by making them understand that they were never safe, they just thought they were." Holt looked at the map, then at Laura. "That's a long walk. And it starts tonight." Kyle Dunn stood at the back of the bridge, watching 2 people who had spent their entire lives preparing for a moment the rest of the galaxy thought would never come. And he understood, for the first time, that this war was not going to be what anyone expected. Not for the Council, and not for him. The Council fleet gathered at Solace Point like a storm building on the horizon. Over 2,000 warships from 8 different species filled the space around the staging area, each one painted in the colors and symbols of its homeworld. There were the massive, heavy cruisers of the Vorath, built like floating fortresses, with armor so thick it could take a direct hit from a plasma cannon without cracking. There were the fast, needle-shaped interceptors of the Selvari, designed for speed and precision. There were the Drekken carriers, each one holding hundreds of smaller attack craft in their bellies like wasps in a nest. It was the largest combined fleet the Council had assembled in over 300 years, and every officer in that fleet believed the same thing. This would be quick. Ambassador Reth Solani stood on the observation deck of the Vorath command ship and watched the fleet through the wide viewport. He was not a military officer. He was a diplomat. A tall and thin creature with pale blue skin and large dark eyes that were always watching, always thinking. He had been the one to deliver the war declaration to Earth's ambassador. and the memory of that moment still sat in his mind like a stone he could not put down. He had expected fear. He had expected anger, maybe tears, maybe desperate bargaining. What he got instead was a woman who looked at him, read the declaration carefully, and then looked up with an expression he could not understand. She had smiled. Not a nervous smile, not a polite smile, a real one. And then she had said 2 words that he could not stop thinking about. Thank you. Nobody says thank you when they are told they are about to be destroyed, unless they know something you do not. Reth kept this thought to himself. He had tried to raise his concerns with Zelkun before the fleet departed, but the High Arbiter had waved him off. They are humans, Zelkun had said. What could they possibly know? The fleet jumped into the Ardent Rift on schedule. 2,000 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel and spread out across the region in a wide formation, weapons hot, sensors active. Every officer on every bridge leaned forward and waited for the fight to begin. There was nothing there. The 3 human colony moons were dark and empty. No people, no defenses, no ships. The settlements had been stripped clean. Every building, every piece of equipment, every supply container had been removed. It was as if the colonies had never existed at all. The fleet commanders were confused. Some thought it was a retreat, others thought it was a trick. Zelkun, watching from Nethara through a secure feed, made his decision quickly. They have run, he declared. Push forward, move the fleet toward Earth. End this. The Council fleet reformed and began its advance deeper into the rift, moving through the narrow corridors of space between dense asteroid fields and dying stars. It was the only path from the rift to human-controlled space, and the Council's admirals were not worried. Their fleet was enormous. Their technology was proven. They had done this before, to other species, and it had always ended the same way. But none of those other species had been waiting for them. Laura Beckett stood on the bridge of the Pale Horse, watching the Council fleet move deeper into the rift on her tactical display. Each enemy ship was a red dot, and together they formed a long, wide river of red flowing through the narrow corridor. She watched them the way a farmer watches rain clouds approaching, with patience and calm certainty. They are past the midpoint, Holt reported from beside her. Close the door. Holt sent the signal. Behind the Council fleet, inside the asteroids that lined the corridor they had just passed through, 300 human warships powered up their engines and emerged from the rocks like ghosts stepping out of walls. They spread out in a tight formation and sealed the corridor. The Council fleet's retreat was gone. At the same time, far ahead of the Council fleet, another human battle group dropped out of faster-than-light travel and blocked the forward path. The corridor was closed on both ends. 2,000 Council ships were now inside a tube of space with no way out. On the Vorath command ship, alarms began screaming. Officers shouted over each other. Sensor displays lit up with hundreds of new contacts. Human ships that had not existed on any scan 5 minutes ago. Reth Solani grabbed the railing of the observation deck as the ship shook. He looked out the viewport and saw them. Human warships, dark and sleek, moving into position with a precision that made his breath catch. They were not rushing. They were not panicking. They moved like they had practiced this 1,000 times. Because they had. Then something happened that no one in the Council fleet understood. The space around the center of their formation began to change. It was subtle at first, a shimmer, like heat rising off hot ground. Then the shimmer became a pull. Ships in the center of the formation began to drift inward, slowly at first, then faster. Metal groaned, hulls bent, a Salvari interceptor crumpled like a piece of paper being squeezed in a fist, folding in on itself until it was nothing but a ball of twisted wreckage. The Blackwell array had fired. Nora Paget watched the data from her station aboard a science vessel positioned behind the human lines. Her hands were steady on the controls, making adjustments in real time, shaping the gravitational fields with the care of a sculptor working with clay. She did not enjoy what she was doing. She had built the array to end wars, not to fight them forever. But she understood what was at stake, and she did her work without hesitation. The Council fleet broke apart. Ships scattered in every direction, crashing into each other, spinning out of control, trying to escape a force they could not see and did not understand. Commanders screamed orders that no one could follow. Some ships tried to jump to faster-than-light speed, but the gravitational distortion made it impossible. Their drives could not lock onto stable coordinates. In the middle of the chaos, Laura opened a channel. Her voice went out to every ship in the corridor, human and council alike. It was calm and clear, like a teacher speaking to a room that had gone quiet. This is Commander Laura Beckett, of the human vessel Pale Horse. You are surrounded. Your retreat is closed. Your forward path is blocked. Your communications with Nethara have been cut. I understand that you came here expecting an easy victory. I am sorry to disappoint you. She paused. On the bridge, Kyle Dunn stood frozen at his station, his hands gripping the edge of his console. He had never heard a voice so steady in the middle of so much destruction. But I am not here to destroy you, Laura continued. I am here to give you a choice. Surrender your weapons and power down your engines, and every person in your fleet will live. You will be treated with respect. You will be fed, given medical care, and returned to your homeworlds when this is over. You have 10 minutes to decide. She closed the channel. The bridge was silent. And if they don't surrender? Then we do what we have to do, she said. But I think most of them will. Nobody wants to die for a war they were told would be easy. She was right. Within 8 minutes, 60% of the Council fleet powered down their weapons and sent surrender signals. White lights blinked across the tactical display like stars coming out at night. The ships that surrendered were mostly the smaller ones, the interceptors, the scouts, the support vessels. Their crews were young and scared, and they had seen what the Blackwell array could do. They wanted no part of it. The rest, mostly the heavy Vorath cruisers and a group of Drekken carriers, chose to fight. The battle lasted 47 minutes. It was not close. The human fleet moved with coordinated precision, striking from multiple angles, using the Blackwell array to disable engines and weapons, rather than destroy ships whenever possible. Laura gave the order 3 times during the battle to offer surrender terms again. Each time, more ships accepted. When it was over, the Ardent Rift was quiet. Broken ships drifted in the dark. Human rescue vessels moved through the wreckage, pulling survivors from damaged hulls, treating the wounded regardless of species. Kyle Dunn stood at the viewport on the Pale Horse and looked out at the aftermath. His hands were shaking. He had watched the entire battle from the bridge, and he had seen something that he would never forget. Not the destruction, but the mercy. Laura had the power to kill every ship in that corridor. She had chosen not to. On the Vorath command ship, now dark and drifting, Reth Solani sat in an escape pod that had been picked up by a human medical vessel. A human medic handed him water and checked his injuries. The medic was young, barely older than a child by Vorath standards, and she smiled at him with genuine warmth. Reth took the water and stared at it. He thought about the ambassador who had smiled when he delivered the war declaration. He thought about Zelkone's confidence. He thought about how sure everyone had been that humans were weak. He drank the water and closed his eyes. They had been so wrong. The news hit Nethara like a wave breaking against a cliff. The Council's combined fleet, the largest military force assembled in 3 centuries, had been trapped, broken, and defeated in less than 1 hour. 60% of the ships had surrendered. The rest had been destroyed or disabled. The humans had not just won. They had won so completely and so quickly that the result felt impossible, like watching a river flow upward. High Arbiter Zelkun stood in his private chamber, alone, reading the reports as they came in. Each one was worse than the last. The Ardent Rift was now fully under human control. The surviving council officers were being held as prisoners, treated well, which somehow made the defeat feel worse. It was one thing to lose to a cruel enemy. It was another thing entirely to lose to one that offered you water and bandaged your wounds while doing it. The council was falling apart. Within hours of the news reaching the member species, the blame had started. The Vorath accused the Selvari of sending outdated ships. The Selvari accused the Drekken of breaking formation too early. The Drekken accused everyone of underestimating the humans. Private messages flew between capitals. Alliances that had held steady for centuries began to crack like old ice. Two species, the Telvari and the Koshan, broke away entirely. They sent secret communications to Earth's government, asking for separate peace talks. They wanted out of the war before it got worse. They had seen what happened in the Rift, and they had no desire to be next. Laura Beckett knew about the back-channel communications within minutes. Her intelligence network was thorough and fast, built over 2 decades by people who understood that information was worth more than any weapon. She read the messages, nodded, and set them aside. The Telvari and the Koshan would be useful later. For now, she had somewhere to be. She stood in front of the war map on the pale horse and drew a line with her finger from the Ardent Rift to Nithara. It cut through the heart of Council territory, past 3 major defense stations, through 2 heavily guarded choke points, and across a stretch of space that no enemy fleet had ever crossed. Derek Holt stood beside her and looked at the line. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said what he was thinking, because that was who he was. Laura, we just won the biggest victory in human history. We could stop right here, negotiate from strength, get everything we want without pushing further. Laura did not take her eyes off the map. And then what? And then we go home. She shook her head slowly. If we stop now, we win a treaty. Paper and promises. The Council licks its wounds, rebuilds its fleet, and in 10 or 20 years, they come back. Next time, they will not underestimate us. Next time, they will bring something we cannot beat. She looked at him. I am not fighting this war for us, Derek. I am fighting it for the children who have not been born yet. I want them to grow up in a galaxy where no one ever considers starting this war again. Holt held her gaze for a moment, then looked back at the map. Then we need a way past those choke points. The Council will have reinforced them by now. A straight push through will cost us ships and people. I know, Laura said. That's why I called Nora. Dr. Nora Paget arrived at the fleet aboard a fast science vessel 2 days later. She looked tired but alert, her glasses slightly crooked, her coat pockets stuffed with data cards and a half-eaten protein bar. She walked onto the Pale Horse's bridge like she had been there 100 times, even though it was her first visit. I have something new, she said to Laura, without any greeting or small talk. That was Nora. She did not waste words on anything that was not science or strategy. She pulled up a display and showed them a simulation. The Blackwell array, she explained, had a secondary capability that she had been developing in theory for years, but had never tested at full scale. By reversing and focusing the gravitational fields, the array could tear open a temporary corridor through space, not a true wormhole, but something close, a fold, a shortcut. It could move the entire fleet past a choke point in minutes, depositing them on the other side as if they had simply skipped over it. How stable is it? Holt asked. Nora pushed her glasses up. Stable enough. Probably. Probably? Science is about probability, Captain. I am giving you a very good one. Laura made the decision without hesitation. Do it. Back on Earth, Admiral Greg Sawyer was fighting a different kind of battle. The civilian government was rattled. When Sawyer had briefed the president and the cabinet on the full scope of the Long Winter Project, the Ghost Fleet, the Blackwell Array, the war room beneath the Pacific, the room had gone very quiet. Several officials looked angry. Others looked frightened. One of them asked the question that was on everyone's mind. How long has this been happening without our knowledge? Long enough to save us, Sawyer replied. He did not apologize. He did not explain himself. He simply told them the truth. The military had prepared for this war because it was inevitable, and now that it was here, they needed to let Laura Beckett finish what she had started. The president looked at him for a long time. Then she nodded. Finish it. 1,200 light-years away, Kyle Dunn could not sleep. He had tried for 3 hours, lying in his narrow bunk aboard the Pale Horse, staring at the ceiling. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw ships folding in on themselves. He saw wreckage spinning in silence. He saw the faces of the council prisoners being brought aboard human ships, confused, frightened, and alive only because Laura Beckett had decided they should be. He gave up on sleep and walked to the observation deck. It was a long, quiet room with a wall of transparent material that looked out at the stars. He expected to be alone, but Laura was there, standing with her hands clasped behind her back, staring out at the darkness. He almost turned around, but she spoke without looking at him. Cannot sleep either? Kyle walked forward and stood a few steps away from her. No, ma'am. They stood in silence for a while. The stars did not move. The ship hummed softly around them. Can I ask you something? Kyle said. You can ask. I might not answer. Did you ever want a normal life? Before all this? When she spoke, her voice was softer than he had ever heard it. I did. Once. I wanted to teach. History, maybe. I liked the idea of helping young people understand where we came from so they could figure out where to go. She paused. But then I saw where we were going, and I realized that if someone did not do this, there would not be a future worth teaching about. Kyle looked at her. In the dim light of the observation deck, she did not look like a commander. She looked tired. She looked human. Is it worth it? He asked. She turned to him. Her eyes were steady, the same eyes that had stared down a war map, and whispered finally when the galaxy came knocking. But there was something else in them now, something gentle and sad. Ask me when it is over, she said. The next morning, the fleet moved. Nora activated the Blackwell Array's secondary function, and space itself seemed to fold in front of them. The corridor opened, a shimmering tear in the fabric of reality, just wide enough for the fleet to pass through single file. One by one, the ships entered. Kyle watched from the bridge as the stars stretched and twisted around them, and then, in the time it took to draw breath, they were on the other side. They had bypassed the first choke point entirely. The Council defense station there detected nothing. By the time its sensors registered the gravitational disturbance, the human fleet was already gone, deeper in Council space than any human ship had ever been. They did it again at the second choke point, and again at the third. In less than a day, the Pale Horse and its fleet arrived in the Nithara system. The Council's capital station hung in space ahead of them, enormous and ancient, covered in lights that made it look like a city floating in the dark. On that station, Zelkone stood at his window and stared at the human fleet. 300 warships, arranged in perfect formation, surrounding his world. They had crossed the entire width of Council space in hours. They had passed through every defense without being touched. His hands, all 6 of them, were shaking. He had lived for over 1,000 years. He had ruled the Council for 3 centuries. He had never, in all that time, felt what he felt now. He was afraid, and for the first time, he understood. Humanity had never been beneath the Council. They had been beside them all along, walking quietly in the dark, waiting for the moment when the galaxy would finally see them for what they truly were. The human fleet did not fire. 300 warships held their positions around Nethara, engines humming, weapons charged, and not a single shot was released. The Council's capital station sat in the center of the formation, like a jewel inside a closed fist, and that fist could have squeezed at any moment. Everyone knew it. The humans knew it. The Council knew it. The thousands of civilians living and working on Nethara knew it. But Laura Beckett had not come here to destroy. She had come here to be understood. She stood on the bridge of the Pale Horse, hands clasped behind her back, and opened a channel. Not a private one, not a military frequency. She broadcast on every channel, to every station, every colony, every ship, and every homeworld connected to the Council's communication network. Billions of beings across the galaxy heard her voice at the same time. I speak to you, not as a conqueror, but as a neighbor. 42 years ago, my species joined your council. We came with open hands and honest intentions. We wanted to learn from you. We wanted to build with you. We wanted to be part of something greater than ourselves. She paused. The bridge was silent. Kyle Dunn stood at his station, with his hands at his sides, listening like everyone else. Instead, we were given a small chair at the back of the room and told to be quiet. Our trade was restricted. Our growth was limited. Our dignity was taken, piece by piece, year by year, until the galaxy decided we were so small that we could be punished for daring to exist beyond the borders you drew for us. Her voice did not rise. It did not tremble. It was steady and calm, the voice of someone who had carried a weight for a very long time and was finally setting it down. We did not start this war. You did. And now we are here, at the heart of your civilization, with the power to end it in any way we choose. But I want you to understand something about humanity. We do not want your worlds. We do not want your resources. We do not want to rule this galaxy, or sit in your chair, or make you feel what we felt for 42 years. We want one thing and one thing only. We want to live in this galaxy as equals. Nothing more, nothing less. And we are willing to fight for that, and we are willing to stop fighting for that, depending on what you decide in the next few hours. She closed the channel. On Nethara, the broadcast had been heard by every member of the Council, and every civilian on the station. The reaction was mixed. Some species were furious. The Vorath military commanders wanted to launch a final defense, to die fighting rather than accept terms from a species they had looked down on for decades. Others were relieved. The Koshan and Telvari representatives, who had already been seeking peace behind closed doors, immediately sent messages of support. And Zelkun sat alone in his chamber, staring at nothing. He had ruled for 3 centuries. He had overseen dozens of conflicts, negotiated hundreds of treaties, and shaped the political landscape of the galaxy with his own hands. He had always believed that power came from strength, and strength came from being the biggest, the oldest, the most established. Humanity was none of those things, and yet here they were, holding the knife to his throat and offering him a handshake with the other hand. A message arrived on his private console. It was from Reth Salani. Reth was still aboard the human medical ship, being treated for injuries he had sustained during the battle in the rift. He had been given a private room, clean clothes, food that was warm and well prepared, and a level of care that surprised him deeply. No one had been cruel to him. No one had questioned him or tried to extract information. A young human doctor had even asked him about his family, and seemed interested in the answer. His message to Zelkun was short. High Arbiter, I have spent the last several days among humans. I have watched them tend to our wounded, with the same care they give their own. I have seen their young officers share food with our soldiers. I have listened to their commander offer mercy when destruction would have been easier and faster. They could have killed every one of us in the rift, every single one, and they chose not to. That is not weakness. I do not think we have a word for what it is, but I believe it is the reason they are at our door now, and we are not at theirs. I urge you to accept their terms, not because we are beaten, but because they are offering us something we never offered them, a chance to be better. Zelkun read the message 3 times. Then he stood up, straightened his robes, and walked to the council chamber. The meeting was short. Zelkun proposed accepting the human terms. The vote was not unanimous this time. 3 species voted against, including the Vorath military faction, but the majority carried it. The council agreed to negotiate. The meeting between Zelkun and Laura took place aboard a neutral station, a small diplomatic outpost halfway between Nethera and the Pale Horse. The room was plain, with a single table and 2 chairs, one built for a Vorath and one for a human. Security was minimal. 2 guards on each side, standing at the walls, silent. Zelkun entered first. He filled the room. He was tall, ancient, and carried himself with the weight of centuries. His 6 limbs moved with slow grace, and his dark eyes held the kind of depth that comes from having seen more of history than most species would ever know. Laura entered a moment later. She was smaller than he expected. Her hair was pulled back, and she wore a simple uniform with no decorations, no medals, no symbols of rank. She sat down across from him and folded her hands on the table. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Zelkun asked the question that had been burning in his mind since the fleet appeared at his doorstep. "How long have you been planning this?" Laura looked at him. Her expression was calm, neither proud nor ashamed. "Since I was 11 years old," she said. Zelkun stared at her. 11, a human child. A child had watched the galaxy insult her species and decided, in that moment, to change the course of history. He did not know whether to feel admiration or something closer to fear. "And if we had not declared war," he asked, "if we had left you alone?" "Then none of this would have happened," Laura said. "The fleet would have stayed in the rocks. The array would have stayed on Titan. And I would have stayed in my room under the Pacific, growing old and hoping I was wrong about you." She paused. "But I was not wrong, and here we are." The negotiations lasted 2 days. The result was the Nethera Accord, a new treaty that reshaped the political structure of the galaxy. Humanity was granted full and equal membership in the Council, with the same rights, the same vote, and the same standing as every other species. All trade restrictions and technology embargoes were lifted. In exchange, humanity agreed to share certain technologies, selectively and carefully, and to participate in a new mutual defense framework that would protect all member species equally. It was not a perfect agreement. No agreement ever is. But it was fair, and it was real, and it was built on something that the old order had never had: mutual respect. The Pale Horse began its journey home on a Tuesday. Kyle Dunn stood on the bridge, now wearing the rank insignia of a full lieutenant. He had been promoted quietly, without ceremony, the way Laura did most things. He looked out at the stars through the main viewport and tried to understand everything that had happened in the last few weeks. He was not sure he could. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Laura stood nearby, staring at the same stars. She was still. For the first time since Kyle had met her, she was not looking at a map or a screen or a tactical display. She was just looking at the dark. Derek Holt walked up beside her. He had a cup of coffee in one hand and a slight smile on his face, the kind of smile he only showed when he thought no one was watching. "So," he said, "what do we do now?" Laura did not answer right away. The ship moved through the silence of space, carrying its crew home, carrying the weight of everything they had done and everything they had chosen not to do. She thought about the girl she had been, sitting on the living room floor, watching the galaxy laugh at her people. She thought about the woman she had become, standing in a room under the ocean, whispering one word that set everything in motion. She thought about the future, not the one she had planned for, but the one that came after the plan was finished. The harder one. The one where you had to live with the people you had just beaten, and find a way to build something together. Now we do the harder thing, she said. We live with them. Holt nodded slowly. He did not say anything else. He did not need to. On Nathara, weeks later, construction began on a new building. It was the human embassy, the first permanent one, built on the station's main boulevard, where every species could see it. It was not the biggest building on the boulevard. It was not the fanciest, but it was there, and it was real, and it had a door that was always open. A young alien child, small and green-skinned, with wide, curious eyes, stopped on the walkway outside the embassy and watched a human construction worker carry a beam across the entrance. The worker noticed the child and stopped. He was a big man with rough hands and a kind face, and he looked down at the small creature watching him with such serious attention. He smiled and waved. The child hesitated for a moment. Then it lifted one small hand and waved back. The galaxy was quiet again, but it was a new kind of quiet. Not the silence of being ignored, not the silence of being afraid. It was the silence that comes after a storm, when the rain stops and the sky clears and everything feels clean and possible and new. It was the silence of being seen, and somewhere, on a ship flying home through the stars, Laura Beckett closed her eyes and rested for the first time in 42 years.